one to tell us no, or where to go, or say we're only dreaming.
Hi, I'm Angel Davis of Angel Davis Coaching, and you are listening to Verbally Naked, a podcast devoted to the enhancement of relationships, or so we hope. I'm here with Mr. Peter Hermes.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. Peter, I had a thought.
Okay.
So tomorrow is traditionally our movie night. We have movie night for those listening. We have movie night every Friday. And what that means is that Brian, our daughter, gets to choose the movie that we watch. And Peter usually makes homemade pizza, right?
Yes, and popcorn.
And we make homemade popcorn, and we sit down and watch a flick. And usually they're animated.
Right. Well, it's whatever Brian wants.
Yeah. Which, I mean, sometimes
Brian likes cartoons.
sometimes we get on a superhero jag, and it's a lot of the Avengers movies and whatnot. I'm sure, like, I just felt like a bunch of, like, parents that just shuddered because we let her watch the Avengers movies, whatever. Yeah. But a lot of times it's animated.
Yes.
And we have been talking about, this season, we have been talking about how media influences relationships, right? Magazines, movies, music. TV, yeah. And so we watch a lot of animated movies now.
We do.
Yeah. And I kind of just wanted to talk about how, the big heavy animators, the Disneys, the Pixars, which is now still Disney, Warner Brothers, all the big wigs who do animated, like how some of the movies that we think, portray relationships. What do you think of that?
Well, I thought of it in terms of, Brian is filling her brain with these movies, and we all did at that age.
Yeah.
And so these movies, specifically animated films, are defining or, telling us what the world looks like, or in a fantastical kind of way, but to a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old or, a child.
Mm-hmm. It's a very
We're very
influential
impressionable
age.
at that.
Yeah.
We're very impressionable at that age because we have no previous experience.
Right.
And, Brian is 7, and soon she'll be 8, and then she'll be 12, and then she'll be dating. And, these are
Excuse me? Why would you say that?
These are going to be some of the things that inform her on society's rules to a certain degree, on what relationships look like, all of those kinds of things. The media is very, very powerful. And we all, well, I wouldn't say all, but we all grew up watching
a lot of us grew up,
and animated movies.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how old you are, you may have grown up watching Cinderella, or you may have grown up watching Aladdin, depending on your age.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these Disney and Warner, all these big studio animated movies,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are about love stories. A lot of them are fables. Early Disney is a lot of German fables, and all of these they're fairy tales, basically. A lot of them are princesses and princes and kingdoms and things of that nature. And they are telling you, earlier animated movies are really kind of telling girls what the world looks like, and in a very antiquated way.
Yeah.
And nowadays, within the last 20 years, I think that we've progressed, and the animated movies have gotten a lot better in how they inform the young mind as to their play, a lot more independent thinking things. So anyway,
and I think
that's what we want to do, is we want to talk about those animated movies that we all kind of grew up on and still watch, and how they've sort of formed us and our opinions and our views.
I think that the last several movies that we've seen don't even cater to that. So it is an interesting thing. I don't necessarily think that I don't know if they're moving away from that per se, or because like for instance we saw Boss Baby and Captain Underpants and kind of dealing with more of a sibling relationships than
right. Those movies don't really deal with with a love interest storyline.
Yeah, and even Batman, the Lego series, even though there was a love interest in the Lego movie per se, but really it was an ensemble sort of. The relationship was kind of a secondary thing to me. But you're right. So wait. First of all, do you remember a lot of what you saw as a kid?
Well, let's see. I remember seeing Bambi.
Oh,
Heartbreaking. Not a movie that really informs us about romantic relationships.
No.
But
I was just interested in
the relationships that we have with our friends and things of that nature.
Yeah, I just remember if you.
I remember watching Cinderella, which we're going to talk about Cinderella.
Well, tell
in
me
this
about
podcast. Okay, well, let's start with Cinderella.
Yeah.
Actually, let's start with Snow White because Snow White is the first animated feature film Disney ever did. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
And so Snow White is not one of those movies that I have like deep memories of. I remember I remember what it's about. I remember the little dwarves, Happy and Sneezy and all those little guys.
Yeah, I have to be honest. Like I really kind of want to ask my mom. I assume that we watched it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any memories of it?
I do, but I'm kind of not sure if it's just from seeing clips.
It might be. Well, Snow White is where it introduces the wicked stepmother.
Right.
And
I know the premise of the story, but only because.
Right. And that was a theme. That whole wicked queenie stepmother. It's in Cinderella. It's in Snow White.
Yeah.
And in Snow White, she wants to be the most beautiful. She's the queen, and she wants to be the fairest and the fairest of them all.
Because that's important.
Very much so. And she has a mirror that kind of helps her with her self-confidence, and she asks the mirror who's the fairest of them all, and the mirror's like, well, your daughter or your stepdaughter.
Is she related?
I think Snow White is her stepdaughter.
Well, I know Cinderella.
It's either her daughter. I think it's her stepdaughter. So
really
Snow White.
No, I know.
Yeah, Snow White is the queen's stepdaughter, and she is the most beautiful girl in the world.
Oh, I don't remember
And that
them
is a
being
problem.
related.
That is a problem for the queen.
Are you sure they're related?
It's her stepmother.
Okay. I told you that I don't have a lot of memory of this.
So anyway, so I think that the stepmother banishes her or whatever, and so she has to go into hiding.
She does some,
And she goes and lives with a bunch of little old men.
Which is very safe. It sounds very safe
Sure.
to send a young girl away with
this is all German folklore, basically.
Okay.
Send them into the woods, and you're on your own now.
The woods, no doubt.
So anyway.
So she joined a cult.
So she becomes the house mother for this little fraternity, basically. She cooks them meals, and she makes their clothes, and they go off, hi-ho, off to work they go in the mines, and... So anyway, the stepmother finds out where she is eventually.
Okay.
And she's like, I got to get rid of her. And poisons an apple and goes and tricks Snow White into eating this apple, which puts her in a coma. Mm-hmm. And then, so the 7 dwarves come back and they think she's dead. So they stick her in a glass coffin and throw her out in the woods. And they're like, mourn her. The only way that this spell can be broken, and this kind of circles around to the whole... why are we talking about this movie, is the only way that the spell is broken and she can ever wake up is if she is kissed by a man, kissed by her Prince Charming. And so the prince, or a prince, I'm not really sure, the men in early Disney and early animation aren't really given much of a story. They just represent the man. From what I can tell, it's usually like Cinderella and all these. They're the women, and we see their story and how bad things are for them. And then there's the guy, but you don't know much about him. He's always a prince. He's always the king's. He represents.
Does that upset you that they don't really go into the guy's detail.
No, it wasn't.
Poor guy.
It upsets me because
kidding.
of what the message is to women or to young girls.
Of course.
Is it doesn't matter. All your problems will be solved
Yeah.
by a guy.
Yes.
And that's Cinderella and Snow White are both guilty of that.
Well, many, I guess particularly Disney films, cater to that. I think it's only really in later years where I've seen stronger women. As in, like, you know, the guy, the focus is more on the guy sort of fawning all over the female.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just, you know, really kind of been in the last few years have I really seen where it seems like it's less of, you know, what you're saying. It's a little bit less of that, but yeah. So there's really, it sounds like there's really nothing about their relationship that gets addressed other than
that's the whole
he
thing
has to save her.
That's the whole thing about these movies.
Yeah.
Is they're not about the relationship.
She's the damsel in distress.
The whole thing about these movies and what they talk about with the relationships is it doesn't deal at all with the relationship because there's the happily ever after. All it deals with is the start, the meet, the kiss,
Right.
the finding the girl who lost her slipper. And that's it. And then we're all supposed to just assume that things are going to be great from then on. Snow White ends with being woken up by her Prince Charming, and that's it. The end. She will live happily ever after because the man has shown up. And Cinderella, she, in her own story, she's got the wicked stepmother who wants to get her daughters married off, and there's a prince that's looking for, you know, female suitors, and so they leave her behind to clean the house or whatever, and she figures out a way to get to the, you know, her fairy godmother shows up, and, you know,
Right.
she gets all dressed up and all that, and she goes to the ball, and they dance, and there's a connection, and then the timing is all bad, and she has to run home. Her shoe falls off, and he's got to figure out whose shoe is this. That's the girl for me, and finally slips the shoe on her, and it's over. They live happily ever after. There is no what then.
Right.
You know, there is no relationship. It is all a dream. It's a pipe dream of what, and that's what kids are watching. They're like, all I need to do is just find that person. There is no talk of what then.
Yeah, and I mean, and I know that there may be people listening that's like, guys, it's an animated film. Like, it doesn't need to get super heavy and dramatic, and we understand that. I don't think that that's exactly what you're saying, but it's just the seed that gets planted so early within us.
Well, with those are very antiquated. You know, I think Snow White came out in the 30s, and Cinderella came out in the 40s. You know, this is you know, quite a while ago.
Well, then, like, fast forward to, like, The Little Mermaid.
So then you get so The Little Mermaid came out in what, 88, something like that, mid to late 80s.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's one of the last Disney movies that they still did cell animation on. They very quickly after that turned to digital and were able to pump out movies much quicker.
Yeah.
Little
Mermaid.
Little Mermaid's another movie I have a big problem with because the whole premise of the movie is here is a girl who is a mermaid who has to live under the sea, and the guy that she sees,
that's where mermaids should live.
This guy that she sees from a distance, she falls in love without ever meeting him.
Well, of course.
And the only way to meet him is to become a human. So she goes and sells her soul to the devil to get legs. Well, I mean, she goes to the.
Yes, the sea witch.
She goes to the sea witch, and she gives her the legs, but she's like, well, you can't have your voice, so you're going to have to get him on your own merit.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm not a big fan of that. Again, what it supposes for either, and once again, this is a movie told from the female's point of view, all you need is a man. That is going to solve all of your problems, is a man. And that is
Yeah,
what
and that's
what kids are, you know.
That's her gateway to a whole new world. Literally. That's right. Like she wants to be part of that world.
Sure, but
And,
she
I
knows
mean,
nothing about it.
she doesn't.
All she knows
You
is
raise
the
a
stuff
good
that
point
falls,
about-
the stuff that is in sunken ships. Look at this hairbrush. Look at these these things that I know nothing about.
Yeah.
I want to be part of that,
Well,
but I don't know what any of that
It's
means.
curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you raise a point about the whole love at first sight thing. But for one, and then two, also characters that feel the need to be something they are not. Now, ultimately, that's an example. Aladdin's an example. Shrek is an example of characters sort of turning themselves into something that they are not in order to impress
Sure.
the person that they love, thinking that that's what they need to be. And ultimately,
Well,
it
that's
gets...
dating. That's what dating is.
Excuse me?
That's what you do when you date.
That is not what you're supposed to do when you
Well,
date
but
people.
that's what it is.
Be yourselves. Because you know what? Because,
That you're going to get found out eventually.
yeah, let's talk about that. That's what ends up happening with, the whole, since we got married, everybody's like, I'm sure people are asking you, how is it?
Sure.
Yeah. And I'm like,
It's horrible. We're married now.
no, but I mean, my response is, well, it's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's exactly the way it should be.
Right.
But the fact that question gets asked to me is a little bit like, so we're still expecting something completely different.
Right.
When
is life going to be this fairy tale
yeah, the
that we were taught?
celebration, of course, is fun. Like or should be the wedding and all the prep. That's a fun celebration of your union. But the actual meat of your relationship shouldn't change, in my opinion. That's why why you've chosen this person to be married to. You guys know that this is what you want. You can have this for the rest of your life. There are goals that you want. There are things you want to do together. But the core of who you are, you already appreciate enough to marry that person.
Right.
So you raise, I think that's a good point about, that's what dating is. Yeah, I understand the putting your best foot forward, but I think that's what gets people in trouble is this idea that you have to be something that you're not. And if you feel you have to be that way, A, there's something to look at, and B, what is it within that, that person that's making you want to do that? I don't want you to be one of the things you always said to me, even as friends, is I can always be myself with you.
Mm-hmm.
I never feel like I have to
That's rare.
be anything else.
I don't know. It's rare for me.
Yeah.
Maybe some people can just always be themselves with everybody else, but we all
Who are you? Who are you when you're not with me, mister?
No, when you're with other people, friends or whatever.
That's what I'm talking about.
You put on, we had a conversation earlier about the cool kids.
Yeah,
And
the cool kids.
all of that stuff. You put on kind of like, hey, I'm one of you, and so I think that
well, and I just the animation sort of going back to the subject.
Let's circle back here.
Yeah, so the animation there are characters that tend to do that. They go through this whole rigmarole of trying to be something they're not.
The
exactly.
Person. and I think Aladdin is a really good example of that. Even though ultimately I think at the end of that movie things are right, but getting there. Whereas
it's the same thing
like
with the Little Mermaid.
Yeah. Okay. That's true.
She gets what she wants, and he gets,
Yeah. Those two.
I mean, they always bring it back to it works out in the end.
Right.
But there's never like a conversation where where Eric was like, "Well, you lied to me."
No, of course. But there is that in Aladdin. She finds out, and there's a problem.
Yeah, but here's what's interesting. So once they, I guess he marries into wealth. So
Right.
Because I was like, he doesn't stay a prince because her father says, okay, I can eliminate that rule and you can marry whoever you want. And she chooses Aladdin, who isn't a prince. So he doesn't have to become a prince to marry her. I guess he just marries into her wealth because obviously they're going to live in the palace. She's not going to choose to live in his shack.
No.
Unlike Shrek, though, where she does end up living in the swamp with Shrek. But that's a whole different subject.
Sure.
But I think it's good that you bring up those points. Turning into something you're not, and also the whole, you know nothing about this person. They see them, and it's like an instant. And
well, at least with Aladdin, they have a little bit in the marketplace.
They do. They have a little bit of an exchange.
With
Eric and
with Ariel and
Ariel,
Eric,
yeah.
she's his
siren.
Fawns over him from a distance.
Yeah, and
they never have a moment.
She's his siren. Well, she saves him.
Right, but he's not conscious for. I mean, is he even part of that?
Yeah, I mean, he wakes up when she sings. That's why he knows her voice.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But still.
Have you seen the movie?
It's been. I just remember Les Poissons. That's really the only thing I liked about that movie.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Aladdin.
but
At least they have a little bit of a foreshadow.
You're right. There's a little bit of exchange there.
You know, he finds out.
Yeah,
that
there's some
is a
chemistry
rule.
happening, and I'm not saying for people that are like, my wife walked into a room and I instantly knew. Yes, okay, but it's rare that it happens like that,
Right.
which is how it's portrayed, and this is what our kids are watching.
Right.
But I don't even know if you should. I mean, like, I want to.
I say we move on to some.
I know, but I want
good
to. Like, I want to
examples.
instantly cry when I think of this. But I think that one of the most brilliant depictions of a relationship, wherein you don't even see them like literally together, like they have no real exchange, is because it's silent. Is Up.
Well, what do you mean by exchange?
You see them, but like it's silent. It's music overplaying. Like we see.
Well, I know, but it's not like they'd never talk to each other. It's their whole life.
Barely, but like, yeah, but it's their whole life with music over it. Like
Right.
you don't, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like we don't really get to hear true interaction. We see their courtship,
Right.
and then we see conflicts. We see they can't have kids.
Right. No, it's very powerful.
Like it makes me very sad thinking about it.
No, it's very good.
And then
it's a lifetime.
It's like how many seconds?
It's a whole relationship, and I think it's about 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, and like it leaves you just like, like I remember exactly which friend. It was a group of friends and I who were watching. We all wanted to see it, and I remember after that scene, that 10 seconds, we all leaned out and looked at each other, and we were all just like
Oh, yeah.
crying. We were like, "What is happening? This is an animated film. What is happening?" But it's so beautiful. I mean, we see them get old together. We see that she gets sick
Right.
and she ultimately dies. And that to me just had more. There's more not said. I don't know how to say it in that 10 seconds than when you see these
Minutes.
superficial.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, it's a really good example of compressing a lifetime into
Yeah.
a kind of a 10-minute musical montage,
Yeah.
which I thought was done really well. I think,
yeah.
for my money, I think that one of the best representations of a real life relationship in an animated movie would be from The Incredibles, where you have
Yeah.
two superheroes
Yeah.
that get
I love
married.
Holly Hunter.
They get married, and you see the real love, like the what people deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's not happily ever after. It's, we got to feed the kids tonight. What'd you do tonight? What, you going out bowling again? Why aren't you going to hang out with me? But then there's real love over here. I think that is like a true representation of a real life relationship.
Yeah, because again, we sort of see, we see them in their prime, where neither one of them are like, well, I gotta settle down. And this is, I'm doing my
Right.
thing. I have my career, and then they end up getting together, and then once kids happen, There's a totally shift of focus.
Oh yeah.
And then they
And
deal.
they age.
And they age. They actually, and they
'Cause
age.
they marry when they're probably
They're pretty young,
25,
30s,
prime strength of their lives.
early life.
And then you pick up, after, the kids are, the oldest is, 12 maybe?
Maybe, or 10.
They've got to be in their early 40s at this point.
Yeah.
And they've aged physically, they've aged mentally, and their relationship
They deal with
has matured.
him, like, almost having a midlife crisis, really, where he's not happy at work.
Mm-hmm.
He
misses the good old days.
He misses the good old days.
Yeah.
And, kind of the moonlighting that he does, thank goodness it's not with another woman.
Right.
But the stuff that he's not communicating with her,
Right.
which is
It
deals with the breakdown of communication.
It deals with that.
Yeah.
It's minor deceit. I mean, it's not like he's
He's not having an
he's
affair.
not being
like I said.
spiteful,
No.
right? But he is lying
But
to
he is
his
lying.
wife.
Yeah.
And those are real things. Those are real relationship things.
They are, and I don't think that
Like, no relationship is perfect.
right. And I think that you're right. It's done well, and it shows that you can have these conversations and it still be an entertaining film, which is what it was. I mean, it is. It's a great film.
It's I mean, it's literally about a family. I mean, they just happen to be superheroes, but it's not. The movie doesn't. It doesn't. Whereas, for example, with the movie Up,
Mm-hmm.
where it is a very just wham bam 10-15 minutes musical montage of the beginning to end of a relationship.
Yeah.
That it shows the goods and the bads and all of those things, but it cuts out all the mundane day to day. It hits every major life plot point.
Yeah.
Until, all the way up until cancer and death or whatever causes her death. This is day to day. This is eating dinner.
It does show more of their day-to-day life.
What, you got in trouble at school today?
Right.
Stop fighting, kids. I mean, that's
and then,
real stuff.
And you're not, one of the parents is checked out while the other one's sort of doing everything.
Yeah.
You're right. And I think it's good for kids to sort of see that, how they work through that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's a brilliant film. On top of it's just a very well done script. Can I tell you that so most of my friends know me as kind of a hard critic when it comes to movies. Mm-hmm. And I don't really get sad a lot. It takes a lot for me to really get super engaged. Like, it has to be just really well done. And one of the animated movies that just kills me, I don't know. I mean, Up definitely did, but in the way that I think it's one of the sweetest love stories is WALL-E.
WALL-E, I was just going to mention that. It is, and it's, again, it is not a word is spoken between the two of them. I mean, they communicate.
Well, they
figure out how to communicate.
They figure out how to communicate, yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
And it is... I don't know what I'm trying to say about it.
It's not a conventional love story.
It's definitely not a conventional love story. The movie is through the eyes of the male character.
Yeah.
Whereas the older Disney movies are always through the eyes of the Cinderella or the Snow White. And Up is through the eyes of the man, and WALL-E. And it's cute because you've got two distinct personalities between WALL-E and Eva.
Yeah.
He is shy and kind of goofy, and she is no nonsense efficiency.
Yeah.
And it's
It's
difference.
us.
It is the difference between the modern age and the old. She is she's an Apple iPhone.
Yeah.
And he's a trash compactor. I mean, literally. And well, that's what it is, though. That's basically what it is. And at first, he's enamored with her, and he has no problems with her, and she has nothing but problems with him. She's constantly trying to kill him. She's constantly shooting lasers at the guy. And he's like, "What I did?" You know, but he's
so-
fascinated. It would be,
He is.
and because, and to a certain degree, because he's so lonely. He lives alone
He
with
has this
a
little
cockroach
I
friend.
know.
And then the
But that sounds
spaceship.
like he's desperate. Like
He's not desperate.
he falls in love with her.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just like it's.
and then they go up to her world.
Mhm.
Like she can survive on his world because she's got laser guns and
Yeah.
you know, and then they go up to her world, and he is completely just
Well, he's out of his element.
completely. He
Donnie,
doesn't know
you're
what
out
to
of your
do.
element.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's just the little tiny things that he does. Like when he shows her his world, and he's like, you know, he shows her all of the things in his little house, and he shows her the musical, and he shows her what dancing is. She's never danced. And then and he introduces her, like, but when she shuts down, when he gives her the plant and they find the plant, she shuts down, and he's like, what's happening, and what he does to protect her.
Right.
When the rain and the storm, and he has the umbrellas, and it keeps getting struck by lightning, and he has another umbrella waiting. And it's just the gesture that he and what he goes through. Oh, I can't talk.
It's
It makes me so sad.
it's definitely
It's so sweet.
it's very cute. It's very sweet.
No, but and then like, and you know, and you're right, like she constantly is like, oh, you know, Wally, stop, you're trying too hard, and
Yeah.
you know, you're making things worse. But in the end, she really, they find a way to communicate, like you said, like, you know, and they get on the same page, and I think that's kind of the beginning of most relationships. I always say that, you know, you eventually become well seasoned, but you know, you got to find your groove and find your fitting in the beginning, and then once, you know, he shuts, you know, he's practically dead at the end, and it's the hands when, you know, because that's what he does to her when she shuts down. He's like holding her hand, and he's like, hey, and then that's her way of connecting with him, and he it just
We're having a moment.
it does. It's just, I just remember after I watched it, and the first time that I saw it, actually maybe the first two times I saw it, I didn't really, you know, we had Brian by then, and I was just always like busy cleaning the kitchen or doing something when we were sitting down to watch this. And it was sci-fi, which is kind of not my favorite genre of film. So I kind of tuned out. And one day it was on, and I was like, all right. And I think Brian had gone to bed, or, she, you know, or maybe we were watching it during the day. It was Brad and I. And I watched it. I sat down, and I was really present to it. And it got to the end, and I was like, I think that might be one of the sweetest love stories I've ever seen. And Brad goes, I would agree with you. And I look over, and his eyes are all red and like teary-eyed, and I'm just like dropping tears. And I was like, what's happening? But yeah.
It's sweet. It's simple.
It is.
It doesn't deal with any of that really mundane stuff.
And I think that's why I like it, because it's an unconventional love story. And I think that's just more, it's more true to what I hear when I ask people, how did you meet? What made you love them? When did you know? Like, it's just, you know, it's not often love at first sight for both people. Sometimes it's a pursuit. Sometimes it's whatever. It's persistence. It's whatever. There's just more to it than that. Relationships are they're faceted, and they're complex, and they're simple at the same time. And I think towards the latter part, or the later part, I think a lot of, like Pixar, for instance, I think they do a really good job of connecting more to that aspect when they do focus on relationships than, say, the ones that we discussed from the beginning, you know, the earlier animation.
Sure.
I think they're getting maybe a little bit better at it. It's still not great.
I think so.
But
Well, I think that brings us to the last film that we wanted to talk about. So we've kind of gone from the really traditional view
Yeah.
of you must find a mate
yeah.
to the more of the faking it to find a mate, to the ups and the Wally. How about a movie where you're fighting for the right to choose whether you want to find a mate? Because that is not really a theme. I mean, all these movies are sort of set up as love stories. The older ones are set up like you got to find somebody. I mean, that's
Yeah, it's just that's
you
what
must
you do.
find your happily ever
That's
after.
what you do.
Well,
yeah.
what if my happily ever after is by myself? Or
yeah.
what if I don't want to be told what to think and all of that? So anyway, we're going to talk about very quickly the movie Brave. And I don't know
Oh,
how
I
many
love
people
Brave.
have seen Brave. It was new to me when you guys showed it to me. I know it's
Really?
yeah.
Well, why would you?
I
Yeah.
wasn't familiar with Brave.
Yeah,
It's a
why-
great movie. Just a quick, if you haven't seen it, young girl in Scotland back in the 1400s maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Something
Back
like
in the
that.
back in the day.
Back in the day.
Back in the way back.
And she is. Her parents want her to marry royalty.
Of course,
because
she is technically a Disney princess.
She's a princess,
Yep.
but and her dad's the king of not Scotland, but of or just
Their-
like this area.
Their area.
whatever.
Their I don't know
His
how
tribe
they
or
break
his
that up. The clan.
his clan,
yeah.
and so they want her to marry somebody from another clan
Right.
to
Not to be
strengthen the family.
Not can be confused with the Ku Klux Klan.
Why would they do that?
Just
So anyway, that's kind of the premise of the movie, and she is very, very independent. And she's
Yes.
like, "Why do I have
Yes.
to do this? I want to choose." So they're basically like, "Look, there's these 3 guys that are available. Pick one." And
Yeah.
it's like, I don't like any of them. They kind of set it up in the movie where none of them are good choices.
Right.
You got the big dumb guy.
right.
You got I don't
So you got-
remember all 3 of them.
You got Muscles,
yeah, yeah.
who's not very smart.
Yeah, wimpy guy.
You got Wimpy Guy, and then you've got like super skinny guy who thinks he's amazing, but he's so not.
He's just not
He
right.
doesn't have it going on. No.
So they want, and so she's constantly fighting, especially with her mother, about
Yeah.
this. And her mother's not a bad character. She's just traditional. Like, this is how
She's
we
very
do
traditional,
things.
right.
I was betrothed
She's
to your
conservative.
father,
Yeah.
and you will be betrothed to somebody, and then your children, and on and on. That's how the royal line continues.
Yeah.
That's and so basically. There's a contest. She chooses an archery contest, and whoever wins the archery contest will get to marry her. But the trick is that she enters the archery contest also,
Right.
beats everybody, and says, "Well,
Then she.
I get to choose whatever."
She chooses and she chooses not to have
right.
any of it.
And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens in the movie. But
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
what we wanted to talk about.
yeah.
It's really a mother-daughter story. The whole movie is really a mother-daughter.
Yeah. No, this is one of my favorites, and I'm biased. I loved this movie because the brave spirit reminded me of Brian. She's tends to be a little bit, again, non-conforming.
Mm-hmm.
She has from the time she came out, really. But, we recognized at an early age that she just wasn't into a lot of the things that she isn't super... we classify girls and boys as girly or tomboys or blah, blah. She wasn't into a lot of things that a lot of her peers were into. Let's put it that way. And I loved Brave's wild spirit. And there is a relationship with the mom that is interesting. So that was one of the first films wherein they really showed a girl's independence and her right to choose who she wanted, and she wasn't into any of it. Not to say that there was nothing saying that down the road
Right.
she would not find love.
I think for her it was just, you have taken away my independence.
You took my right to choose
Therefore,
what I wanted.
therefore I'm, even if they would have set the movie up with a guy that was acceptable to her, I think the whole
she
point,
might have rebelled.
the whole point was
Yeah.
the rebellion.
Yeah.
You don't give me a choice. Or if you're going to plot my life out,
Yeah.
I have a problem with
Yeah.
that.
Well, Yeah.
And I can understand that. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I did like that this one didn't, it was one of the first ones that didn't really deal with love. It really dealt more with her relationship with her mother and father and how that all connected her. And like you said, her right to choose just to be who she was. She wanted to be free, just a free spirit. And how her parents ultimately accepted that and let her be who she was. A lot of people argue about Frozen. I was not a fan of Frozen, and I'm still not. But a lot of people argued, like, why didn't you like it? Because the sisters save each other. Like, it didn't hinge on a guy.
They did set up like the perfect guy
Saving.
you're rooting for, and all of a sudden he turns into the bad guy.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
What? No.
Yeah, and
no.
and I get it, and I understand that. I had a lot of other problems with that movie other than just that whole thing. So that was not enough for me to be drawn into it. But I also was like, but ultimately, there is still the element of the guy there. Like it's still there. Whereas Brave really it wasn't. I mean, yeah, there are these guys, but the guys actually were like, yeah, we don't want it either.
Right.
At the end, they're like, we want to be able to choose whatever we want
That's
too.
true. I forgot about
We don't
that.
want her.
Right.
Like,
No, it's just the break from tradition,
yeah, and I think that was a really
which Aladdin dealt with as well.
yeah, a little bit, yeah. So, I think ultimately we've seen some moves in the right direction, and it'll be interesting to see what happens as technology gets better and things move forward and social conversations. I think a lot of that had to deal with social conversations. Now we're dealing a lot with, can these animated movies depict girls as anything other than a princess in terms of occupation? But that's a whole nother podcast
Yeah,
that we're not going to deal with right now. So, you've been listening to Verbally Naked. We've been, we took it back to the cartoons.
We did.
To the animated relationships.
Yeah, we took it back to the movies we all grew up, and our children
Are now
if
watching,
we have,
yeah.
are growing up on, and how that informs us.
Yeah. We didn't really, I think you and I probably grew up more on TV animation than we did
Maybe we'll
movies.
talk about TV animation next time.
Ooh.
Maybe
Can we
not.
talk about Shatara?
I want to talk about G.I.
And
Joe
Lady J? Yes!
and the real Ghostbusters.
Yes! That's nothing to do with relationships.
Thundercats,
But, well,
Ho.
Lady J and Flint had a thing going on.
It's true. There weren't a whole lot of relationships happening. It was all just...
It was implied. Anyway, I'm Angel Davis.
And I'm Peter Hermes.
And as always,
Live big.
For you.